The red light from burning worlds filled the window as Yuki watched the last ships escape from Sanctuary Prime. She was an ambassador for the Zilani people, and today she was watching her civilization die. How many got away? She asked Take, her metal friend from the Corvex race. Maybe 2 million people. 12 billion stayed behind. His robot voice sounded flat, but Yuki knew he was sad too. The Void Swarm had been killing everything for 3 years now. They were like giant space bugs that ate planets and turned them into more bugs. Every time the good guys tried to fight them, the bugs got smarter. Every weapon the Galactic Confederation used, every battle plan their best generals made, the bugs learned how to beat it in just a few weeks. Yuki remembered when this all started. The Confederation was made up of 12 different alien races who had been friends for hundreds of years. They had amazing technology and beautiful cities that floated in space. The Zilani people were known for being smart and peaceful. The Corvex were living machines who could calculate anything. The proud Altarians were the best soldiers in the galaxy. Together they thought they could handle any problem. Then the swarm came from the dark space between galaxies. At first nobody was worried. The bugs looked simple and stupid. The Confederation sent their newest warships with energy weapons that could cut through asteroids like butter. The battle should have lasted 5 minutes. Instead it lasted 5 hours. By the end, half the fleet was gone, and the remaining ships watched in horror as the bug ships started shooting the same energy weapons back at them. The swarm had learned how to copy their technology just by being shot at. They adapt too fast, Yuki said, watching another explosion bloom across Sanctuary Prime. Every time we think we have them figured out, they change. The next battles were disasters. The Confederation's plasma cannons worked for one fight, then the bugs developed shields. Their quantum missiles destroyed entire swarms, but then the bugs learned to dodge them. The gravity bombs that could crush moons became useless when the bugs started making their own. Planet after planet fell. The beautiful crystal cities of Altara were turned into bug hives. The ocean worlds of the Aquari became breeding grounds for new monsters. The Confederation kept running, but there was nowhere left to hide. "Sir," said a young Zilani officer, her tentacles shaking with fear. "The council is meeting. They want to discuss the final option." Yuki knew what that meant. For months, some members of the council had whispered about asking the humans for help. Most everyone thought it was a joke. The humans were barely out of their home system. They still used chemical rockets and metal bullets. Their ships were ugly and slow. They fought wars with explosions instead of elegant energy beams. The humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago, and everyone treated them like embarrassing relatives. They were too loud, too violent, too primitive. While other races had evolved beyond physical conflict, humans still punched each other to solve problems. They ate dead animals and drank poison for fun. Their art was full of violence and chaos. But now, with nowhere else to turn, the council was actually considering asking these barbarians for help. The meeting room was filled with the survivors of 12 proud civilizations. Admiral Thex of the Altarians still wore his ceremonial armor, though it was cracked and stained. Dr. Vera of the healing Mareth people kept checking her medical scanner, looking for signs of hope that weren't there. Even the ancient ethereals, beings of pure thought, seemed smaller and dimmer than before. "We have lost 60% of our worlds," reported General Koss, his 4 arms moving as he spoke. "Our remaining fleets cannot hold the outer rim for more than 6 months. The quantum defense grid failed at Titan Station," added another voice. "The swarm broke through our most advanced shields in less than an hour." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Confederation's greatest weapons, their most brilliant strategies, their centuries of advanced science, none of it mattered. They were going to lose. "There is one group we haven't asked," Take said quietly. His metal body clicked in word as he stood up. "The humans of Terra." Half the room started talking at once. The Altarians laughed with bitter humor. The ethereals pulsed with what looked like disgust. Even some of the Zilani shook their tentacles in disbelief. "Those primitive warmongers?" snorted Admiral Thex. "They barely have faster than light travel. Their biggest ships are smaller than our escort vessels. What could they possibly do that we cannot?" "They are the only ones who haven't failed," Take replied simply. Yuki looked around the room at the faces of her allies. These were beings from races that had mastered gravity, bent time to their will, and created artificial suns. They had built wonders that spanned solar systems and solved problems that seemed impossible. And they had been completely defeated by bugs from outer space. Maybe, she thought, it was time to try something different. Maybe being primitive wasn't always bad. Maybe sometimes you needed people who didn't know something was impossible. As another world died in the distance, Yuki made her choice. Send the message to Earth, she said. Ask the humans for help. The room erupted in arguments, but Yuki didn't care anymore. They were desperate, broken, and out of options. It was time to see what the barbarians could do. Admiral Miho stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the alien fleet floating in space. 3 months had passed since Earth got the message asking for help. The aliens had sounded desperate and scared in their transmission. Now he could see why. Their ships were enormous and beautiful, like floating palaces made of crystal and light. But many had big holes in their sides. Some were held together with emergency patches. These once proud vessels looked like wounded animals limping home. Sir, the alien ambassador wants to meet with you again, said Captain Jaiwoo, his second in command. She seems upset about our fleet. Miho almost smiled. He could understand why. The human fleet was 50 ships, and compared to the alien vessels they looked like toys. The human ships were gray and blocky, covered in armor plates and weapon turrets. They had been built for Earth's colonial wars, where pretty didn't matter but tough did. The alien ambassador, Yuki, came aboard his ship with 2 guards. Miho had seen pictures of her species before, but meeting a Zilani in person was still strange. She looked like a person-sized octopus that had learned to walk upright. Her tentacles moved constantly as she talked, which his translator said meant she was nervous. Admiral Miho, she said through the translation device, we were expecting a larger response from your people. The message we sent explained how serious our situation is. I read the message, Miho replied. You're fighting an enemy that copies your weapons and adapts to your tactics. You've lost most of your worlds and most of your fleet. That's why we brought exactly what we brought. Yuki's tentacles twisted in what looked like confusion. I do not understand. We asked for your most advanced warships and your best technology. No, you asked for help. This is how humans help. The meeting room was filled with alien officers from different species. Miho recognized some from the files Earth had on Confederation members. The tall, proud-looking ones were Altarians. The robot-like beings were Korvax. There were others he didn't know, but they all had the same look of desperate hope mixed with disappointment. Admiral, said one of the Altarians, with respect, your ships appear to be quite primitive. Our sensors show you're still using chemical propulsion and kinetic weapons. How can such technology help us when our advanced systems have failed? Miho had heard this question a dozen times since arriving. Tell me, General, what's the first thing you do when you encounter swarm ships? We analyze their capabilities and adapt our weapons to exploit their weaknesses. And then? We engage with maximum efficiency, using our most advanced systems to ensure quick victory with minimal casualties. Right there, Miho said, pointing at the alien general. That's your problem. The room fell silent. Several aliens looked offended that a primitive human was lecturing them on warfare. You fight like you're trying to solve a math problem, Miho continued. You analyze, you optimize, you create the perfect solution. The swarm loves that because they can predict what you'll do. We don't fight like that. How do you fight? Asked Yuki. Badly, usually. We make mistakes, we improvise, we do stupid things that shouldn't work. And that's exactly why they do work. The first test came 2 days later. Swarm scout ships appeared at the edge of the system, 3 sleek vessels that moved like sharks through space. The Confederation ships immediately began their standard response, long-range scans, tactical analysis, optimal weapon selection. The human ships did something different. They charged straight at the enemy. What are they doing? Shouted the Altarian general as he watched the human vessels close distance. They're entering the swarm's adaptation range. Watch and learn, Miho said calmly. The swarm ships fired their copied energy weapons at the approaching humans. The beams that had destroyed Confederation vessels struck the human ships and did almost nothing. The energy scattered harmlessly off thick armor plates. Impossible, whispered a Korvex officer. Those are Confederation-grade plasma cannons. They should penetrate any armor. They would, said Captain Jaiwoo, if our armor was designed to stop energy weapons. But it's not. It's designed to stop rocks and metal flying at high speed. Plasma just slides right off. The human ships kept coming. When they got close enough, they opened fire with weapons that made the aliens stare in shock. Instead of elegant energy beams, the human ships shot chunks of metal at incredible speed. Instead of quantum missiles, they launched containers full of explosives that detonated in crude but massive blasts. The swarm ships, which had adapted to stop sophisticated energy weapons and smart missiles, had no defense against dumb metal projectiles and simple bombs. 2 were destroyed immediately. The third tried to run but was caught by a human interceptor that simply rammed it at full speed. Your pilot just committed suicide. Yuki cried out in horror. No ma'am, replied Miho. His escape pod ejected just before impact. He'll be fine. The ship was built to be crashed if necessary. The alien officers stared at their screens in stunned silence. They had just witnessed something impossible, human primitives defeating swarm vessels that had destroyed the finest ships in the galaxy. I don't understand, said the Alterian general quietly. How did you know their adaptations wouldn't work against your weapons? We didn't, Miho admitted. But we figured if they'd never seen weapons this simple they might not be ready for them. Sometimes the old ways work best. Yuki floated closer to the observation window, watching human repair crews already working to fix battle damage with welders and metal patches instead of sophisticated repair beams. Perhaps, she said slowly, we have been thinking about this war the wrong way. Maybe, Miho agreed. But that's what we're here for. To show you how barbarians fight. General Vex of the Alterian military watched the human training session with growing horror. His people had been warriors for 1,000 years, but what he was seeing now went against everything he believed about proper combat. This is madness, he muttered as Sergeant Huna demonstrated something she called urban warfare techniques to a group of mixed alien and human soldiers. Your energy blades are beautiful weapons, Huna said, holding up an Alterian ceremonial sword that glowed with blue light. But sometimes beautiful doesn't win fights. She set the elegant weapon aside and picked up a crude human explosive device. Sometimes you need something that goes boom and doesn't care how pretty it looks. The alien soldiers shifted uncomfortably. The Zilani officers wrapped their tentacles tighter around themselves. The Korvek's mechanical beings clicked and whirred with what sounded like disapproval. Even the peaceful Marath healers seemed disturbed by the humans' casual attitude toward violence. Sergeant, interrupted Commander Nex, a proud Alterian with 4 arms and golden armor, surely there are more civilized ways to engage the enemy. We have rules of engagement, codes of honor. The swarm doesn't, Huna replied bluntly. You want to follow rules? Fine. The bugs will eat you while you're reading the rulebook. You want to win? Then you fight like your life depends on it, because it does. She led the group to a training area that had been set up to look like a damaged space station. Broken walls, scattered debris, flickering lights. To the aliens it looked like chaos. To Huna it looked like opportunity. Lesson 1, she said. Use everything around you as a weapon. See that broken pipe over there? It's not just debris. It's a club. That exposed power cable? Touch an enemy with it and watch them dance. That puddle of coolant fluid? Slippery surfaces make people fall down hard. Lieutenant Juno took over the next part of the lesson. He was young for a human officer, but he had fought in the Titan colony uprising and knew about desperate battles. Your people fight to minimize casualties, he told the gathered aliens. That's nice. We fight to end wars. Sometimes those aren't the same thing. He showed them something called acceptable losses. The human idea that sometimes you had to sacrifice some soldiers to save many more. The concept made the life-loving alien species physically sick. You would deliberately send people to die? Asked Dr. Mira of the Marath, her healing tentacles quivering with shock. We would send people to fight, Juno corrected. If some die in the process, that's the price of war. But if we don't fight at all, everyone dies. Which choice saves more lives? The aliens had no answer for that. The real test came when Captain Yunbai announced they were going to attack a swarm harvester ship. These were the vessels that landed on planets and turned them into bug factories. The Confederation had tried to destroy harvesters before, but they were heavily defended and could adapt quickly to any attack. The plan is simple, Yunbai explained to the Joint Strike Team. We go in fast, we go in hard, and we blow things up before they can figure out how to stop us. That is not a plan, protested Admiral Kess of the Confederation fleet. That is barely organized chaos. Where are the tactical analyses? The contingency strategies? The casualty projections? Right here, Yunbai said, tapping her head. We figure it out as we go. Works better than thinking ourselves to death. The strike team consisted of 20 human soldiers and 30 alien volunteers who were desperate enough to try human methods. They approached the harvester in small, fast ships that looked like flying junk to alien eyes but moved like angry hornets. The swarm's defensive systems activated immediately, sending out the copied weapons they had learned from fighting Confederation forces. Elegant energy beams and smart missiles filled the space around the harvester. The human response was to ignore most of the incoming fire and ram their ships straight into the harvester's hull. Instead of graceful docking procedures, they used shaped charges to blow holes in the side of the enemy vessel. They are insane, whispered a Corvex observer as he watched human soldiers pour through the breached hull with crude weapons and explosive packs. Inside the harvester, the fighting was brutal and close. The swarm creatures were designed to handle long-range combat and sophisticated weapons. They had no idea what to do when humans started hitting them with metal clubs and setting off bombs in narrow corridors. The alien soldiers learned quickly. A Zilani officer discovered that his natural flexibility let him squeeze through spaces the bugs couldn't follow, then attack from behind. An Altarian warrior found that his 4 arms gave him a huge advantage in the chaotic close-quarters fighting. The mission succeeded when Sergeant Wansik planted a collection of human mining charges in the harvester's power core. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away, and when the light faded, nothing remained of the swarm vessel but glowing debris. Crude but effective, admitted Ambassador Yuki as rescue ships collected the surviving strike team members. It was the Confederation's first major victory against the swarm in over 2 years. More importantly, it was proof that human methods could work. "How did you know it would succeed?" asked General Vex, his earlier skepticism replaced by curious respect. "We didn't," replied Captain Yunbai honestly. "But we knew doing nothing would definitely fail. Sometimes you have to try the crazy plan because the smart plans aren't working." As the combined fleet prepared for their next mission, alien officers found themselves asking different questions. Instead of "what is the optimal solution?" they started asking, "what would the humans do?" The answer, they discovered, was usually something that shouldn't work but somehow did. Sergeant Sungyun looked at his new weapon and smiled. It was ugly as sin but beautiful in its own way. The rifle had Zilani energy cells to power it, human metal projectiles to fire, and Corvex targeting systems to aim it. The whole thing was wrapped in adaptive armor that the aliens had designed and humans had made tougher. "It looks like someone built it from spare parts," said his alien squad mate, a young Altarian named Kex who had learned to fight the human way. "That's because someone did," Sungyun replied. "3 someones actually. Your people made it smart, our people made it mean, and the Corvex made it accurate. It doesn't need to be pretty." The hybrid weapons were appearing all over the combined fleet. Human engineers worked with alien scientists to create tools that neither side could have made alone. Energy weapons powered by fusion cores. Armor that could adapt to enemy attacks while still being tough enough to ram through walls. Ships that combined alien speed with human durability. But the real change was in how they fought. The aliens were learning human tactics, and the humans were learning alien technology. The result was something new and dangerous. Commander Doyen studied the intelligence reports in his cramped office aboard the human ship Defiant. His aide, Lieutenant Sora, pointed to a map showing enemy positions across 3 star systems. "The target is here," she said, indicating a massive structure floating in deep space. "Intelligence calls it the Nexus. It's the central coordination point for swarm operations in this entire sector." Doyen nodded grimly. They had learned that the swarm's ability to adapt came from a network of controlling organisms that shared information instantly across vast distances. Cut the head off the snake and the body would thrash around blindly for a while. "How heavily defended?" he asked. "Heavily. At least 50 major vessels, probably twice that many smaller ones. And the Nexus itself is the size of a small moon." The plan was simple in the way that human plans were simple, which meant it was completely insane by alien standards. A strike force would punch through the swarm defenses, reach the Nexus, and destroy it from the inside. The mission would require someone to fly directly into what was essentially a living fortress filled with hostile aliens. "It's a suicide mission," said Admiral Thex of the Altarians during the planning meeting. "Whoever goes in there won't come back." "Then we make sure it counts," replied Doyen calmly. Ambassador Yuki floated closer to the holographic display showing the Nexus. Her tentacles moved in patterns that the humans had learned meant she was deeply troubled. "Commander," she said, "why would you volunteer for this? Your people barely know us. We treated you like primitives for decades. Why sacrifice yourselves for strangers?" Doyen looked around the room at the faces of his allies. These were beings from races that had mastered incredible technologies and built wonders across the galaxy. They had created art and music and poetry that humans could barely understand. And they were all looking at him like he was crazy for being willing to die for them. "Because that's what soldiers do," he said simply. "We fight so others don't have to. Doesn't matter if those others are human or alien. People are people." The strike force assembled 3 days later. 200 human volunteers and 50 aliens who had learned to fight like humans. Their ships were a mix of human toughness and alien sophistication vessels designed to punch through enemy lines and keep going even when half their systems were destroyed. Captain Jean Wu led the fighter escort, flying a modified interceptor that could dance around enemy fire while delivering devastating counterattacks. His wingman was a Corvex pilot whose mechanical reflexes perfectly complemented human unpredictability. The battle began badly. Swarm defenders swarmed the strike force like angry bees, their adapted weapons tearing through shields and armor. 3 human ships were destroyed in the first few minutes. An alien cruiser lost its engines and began spinning helplessly through space. But the strike force kept going. Human doctrine said that once you committed to an attack, you followed through no matter what. Retreat was not an option until the mission was complete or everyone was dead. "Nexus structure ahead," called out Lieutenant Minji from her sensor station. "It's huge. The thing must be 50 kilometers across." The Nexus looked like a massive brain made of metal and living tissue. Thousands of swarm vessels moved around it in complex patterns, protecting their central command. It pulsed with energy that could be seen even through the chaos of battle. Doyen's ship, the Indomitable, led the final charge. Enemy fire tore through its hull, killing half the crew and destroying most of its systems. But the ship's human-built frame held together long enough to reach the Nexus surface. "All teams, this is Doyen," he said over the radio as his ship crashed through the Nexus's outer shell. "We're inside. Beginning placement of charges now." The next 20 minutes were a nightmare of close combat in alien corridors. The strike team fought their way through swarm defenders to reach the Nexus's core, carrying enough explosive material to crack a planet. "Charges placed," reported Sergeant Yinhua, his voice strained from fighting. "Timer set for 5 minutes. All teams extract now," Doyen ordered. Most of them didn't make it out. The evacuation was chaos, with swarm creatures attacking desperately to stop the humans from escaping. Only 12 members of the strike force reached their ships before the charges detonated. The explosion was visible from the next star system. When the light faded, the Nexus was gone along with most of the swarm fleet that had been defending it. Across 3 sectors, swarm vessels suddenly began moving randomly, attacking each other or just floating dead in space. Without their central coordination, they were just dangerous animals instead of an intelligent threat. As rescue ships pulled the survivors from their damaged vessels, alien commanders watched in silent respect. They had witnessed something beyond their understanding, beings willing to die for strangers, for principles, for the hope of a better future. The tide of war had finally turned. 2 years had passed since the great battle at the Nexus, and Ambassador Yuki walked through the rebuilt gardens of New Sanctuary. The sounds of children playing filled the air, human voices mixed with the musical tones of young Zilani, the clicking sounds of baby Corvex, and the harmonic calls of Alterian youngsters. She stopped by a memorial pond where smooth stones represented each person who had died in the war. A human girl with dark hair was teaching a small Zilani child how to skip stones across the water's surface. The alien child's tentacles moved clumsily at first, but with patience and practice he managed to make a stone bounce twice before sinking. "Yuki," called a familiar voice. Commander Take approached, his mechanical body now sporting several human-design modifications. Instead of the sleek, elegant curves that Corvex had preferred before the war, his new parts were blocky and practical. They worked better, even if they weren't as beautiful. "The children seem happy," Yuki observed, watching the mixed group play together without any thought about which species was which. "They are the future," Take replied. "They will grow up thinking it is normal for different peoples to work together. They will not make our mistakes." Captain Jinwoo walked up to join them. He now wore a uniform that combined human and alien designs, practical human materials with Confederation rank symbols and decorations. His chest bore medals from 3 different species, recognition for his role in the final battles against the swarm. "The Outer Rim Patrol came back this morning," he reported. "No swarm activity anywhere in the sector. It's been 6 months since the last contact. I think we can officially say they're finished." Yuki nodded but kept watching the children. The war had ended, but its lessons remained. The Great Galactic Confederation had been forced to rebuild itself from the ground up, and the new version looked very different from the old one. The new military doctrine bore little resemblance to the elegant strategies of the past. Human concepts of controlled aggression, tactical flexibility, and acceptable losses had become standard teaching in alien military academies. It was messier than before, less refined, but it worked. "Do you remember," Take asked, "when we first met the humans? We thought they were barbarians who solved everything with violence." "We were not entirely wrong," Yuki admitted with what humans had taught her to call humor. "But we missed the important part. They were barbarians who would die for strangers." She thought about Commander Doyen and the others who had sacrificed themselves at the Nexus. The aliens had never understood that kind of thinking before the war. In Confederation society, death was the ultimate failure. Every life was precious, every loss a tragedy to be avoided at all costs. The humans taught them something different. Sometimes death had meaning. Sometimes the willingness to die was what gave life its value. Sometimes the greatest act of love was putting others before yourself. The council meeting is tomorrow, Jinwoo said. They're going to formally vote on the new charter. The new charter would make humans equal members of the Confederation, not junior partners or probationary members. It was a recognition that had been earned in blood and fire, paid for with sacrifice that still amazed the alien species. But more than that, it represented a fundamental change in how the galaxy thought about strength and civilization. For centuries, the Confederation had believed that advancement meant moving beyond primitive things like physical conflict and emotional decision-making. They had thought that the highest form of intelligence was cold, logical, and efficient. The war had shown them otherwise. Sometimes emotion was more powerful than logic. Sometimes intuition worked better than calculation. Sometimes the willingness to fight dirty was the difference between survival and extinction. A young human boy ran past, chasing a floating Alterian child in some kind of game. They were laughing together, communicating in the mix of languages that the new generation was creating naturally. Behind them, alien and human parents watched with weapons at their sides, not the elegant energy weapons of the old Confederation, but the hybrid tools that combined the best of both civilizations. I have been thinking about what we learned, Yuki said quietly. We spent so long trying to perfect our technology, our society, our way of thinking. We believed that sophistication was the same as superiority. And now, asked Take. Now I think we confused being complicated with being strong. The humans showed us that sometimes the simple answer is the right answer. Sometimes the crude method is the effective method. Sometimes being willing to break things is more important than being able to build them. A chime sounded from the memorial pond, the daily moment of remembrance for those lost in the war. The playing children stopped their games and stood quietly for a minute, thinking about the people who had died so they could live in peace. As the chime faded, life resumed its normal rhythm. Construction drones hummed overhead, building new homes and schools. Transport ships carried goods between worlds that were learning to trust each other again. The galaxy was healing. Perhaps, Yuki said, watching the sun set over New Sanctuary, we needed to be broken before we could truly become whole. The stars came out one by one, shining down on a universe that had learned an important lesson. True strength wasn't found in perfection or sophistication. It was found in the willingness to adapt, to sacrifice, to stand up for others even when the cost was everything you had. The barbarians had taught them well. As the three friends walked back toward the city, children's laughter still echoing behind them, the future looked brighter than it had in years. Not because the danger was gone, there would always be new threats, new challenges, new enemies to face. But because they now knew how to face them together.